Next up is a panel debate on AI, and I'm going to hand over the moderation to Javier, right? Right, welcome up.
Cool, thanks a lot. I was supposed to sit on one of those.
Yes.
Oh, these look awkward.
So while they get ready,
No,
the more questions you make, the more chances that you will get some prize, maybe a book. So please keep on bringing your questions. Yeah. No, let's put it. All right, so I think we're going to continue talking about AI. I think it's the theme of the day, or at least the afternoon. So maybe we can spend just 1 minute, like quick intro on, what you guys are doing, what's your role, and maybe Jesus, you want to start?
Yeah. So I'm Jesus Illescas. I work as a developer advocate, especially for NSO, Crosswork, and XR on DevNet.
Hey, I'm Sahithi. I'm from NSO CFP team. We have been developing NSO CFP packages on NSO platform quite some time. Currently, we are also working on the language-driven orchestration interface so that it would be easier for users to adopt NSO. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Mark. So I'm an architect in CX. So I've been working with automation products like NSO and Crosswork for the last 4 or 5 years. And customers are now starting to look at AI use cases in terms of the data that those products are capable of exposing.
Yeah, and I am Mikael Tidemar. I'm a software architect in SP automation team. So I've been working with NSO and related products for the last 9 years now.
Good. So we've seen quite impressive presentations and demos around use cases. Some of them, well, I would say most of them exploratory, but we are in this learning process. I think the whole world, not just our industry or even us, right? But there's one specific point about, hey, how much do we trust on the LLMs and the ability to provide the right response, right? And especially, Jesus, you are doing troubleshooting with an LLM. So can you give your view on how do we build that trust? How do you make sure that you trust in what the LLM is producing, or what mechanisms can be put in place to achieve that trust? What are your thoughts?
So I believe that initially you can start just allowing the LLM to do some read-only actions on the network. So you start to see, okay, the results. You can, as a human, you can review the work the LLM is doing. If it doesn't work, if the results are not good, okay, you can start interacting with it and try to see where it can be improved. Over time, as you can see, if you are getting the results you want, you can start doing something more where the LLM is actually doing something on the network, and probably some, I don't know, easy troubleshooting or easy changes on your network. For example, turning an interface that doesn't have a service, right? So that doesn't produce any harm. And little by little, I consider it's like when you have a junior engineer, you start step by step. And as you continue getting some trust, okay, you start giving some more responsibility.
Yeah, well, that's a good analogy. Actually matches a lot of my experience as well. I used to, when I've been playing with it, I feel like I'm talking with an intern somehow, or a junior engineer. And sometimes if you are not very explicit in what you're asking, if there is some ambiguity, it will go in the wrong direction. So that's something we need to learn, how to communicate better with. We know how to communicate with NetConf, but not with human language, right? With a system like this. So, all of you are starting to, again, to learn how to interact with the systems, right? And especially for some of you, basically all of you are in the software development or have a software development background. So there is a sort of curve on how to address now talking with a system that is not, receiving a structured communication, but basically language, right? It's unstructured. So I wanted to get your thoughts, Sahithi, on, what are the main challenges you have identified, you have seen as you've worked into this, concept of the language-driven orchestration. Coming from pure software development, very deterministic, now interacting with an LLM, which might or might not give you what you want. So what are the challenges that you've faced?
So multiple challenges. The doc query, at least the doc part was pretty straightforward. I was able to do the RAG architecture, which was available in internet, right? Just follow the YouTube. But coming to developing an agent which would interact with a tool like an SO, it was hard to come up with an approach, especially understanding how could we make LLM more deterministic? How could we make LLM come up with a certain X path which would adhere to users' request? And things like how we could interpret the natural language query. There were challenges like first understanding the natural language ourselves. For example, let's say a user says, show device list. Should I show device list names or the whole configuration of all the devices, right? Things like that, to understand that and how I could learn prompt engineering, learn some agentic behavior, learn different kinds of approaches, designs, agent designs to apply that to the solution and see the behavior, then look at the performance, look at the robustness of the performance, how I can toggle the deterministic nature of the LLMs. All of that was a huge learning curve, and finally with the help of a lot of people like you, Javier. So able to learn and come up with the approaches which we have presented today, and something sort of a robust solution. We were able to come up with some kind of robust solution here, yeah. So mostly the challenges were like learning and understanding different designs in AI agentic behavior, I would say.
Good. Any question from the audience at this point? Any question? Is there any question on the system? Okay, then I can just continue, and once you find, or do you have them there? Okay, yeah. How can we justify the energy cost and amount of servers for AI in the data center in a more sustainable world? That's a good question. Anyone? Anyone wants to take it?
I think that it's difficult to actually justify this energy cost, but the best way forward, I think, is to build the data centers with renewable energy. That's what we're doing in Sweden, and even the cooling systems are using clever renewable energy sources, and like using the outside air, which is usually cool in Sweden, to improve the performance of the cooling systems. So I don't think we can stop the development of the AI and the need for more processing power to actually use AI. So I think we need to do the best out of the situation and just focus on the green energy to power them, basically.
I think there's also on this, it really depends on how much we open the Zoom, right, when we look at these type of things, right? Definitely there is a cost involved into the processing, and there is a cost involved into any processing, right? Whether it's for generative AI or for other things, and how driven by the fact that we might be using this technology, we might be doing things more efficiently, which, in other part will introduce savings, including of potentially, energy savings. So, there's always a lot of, lines of communication between what we do and what the impact is. So probably, I guess, it's more complex than just the consumption of the systems, of the AI systems. So there's another question. Are there any examples or labs related to AI coming soon on GitHub?
I think I can take that question. On DevNet, if you go to developer.cisco.com, there is something called topic hubs, which is actually a page dedicated for a topic or subject. And in this case, we had one for AI. And in that page, you can find examples for GitHub. You can find videos that some of my colleagues have created. It's not all of them are exactly for networking, but application as well. So, and actually, probably it's a good moment to comment that in my organization, we create also something called learning labs, where it's an environment where you can go and play. And we are in the process to start to create learning labs for AI with the tools already installed. I mean, probably not the LLM, but at least you will have the libraries, you will have a Juniper notebook where you can start already playing with it.
Mm. Good. So I want to make a question to Mark, because we have maybe an audience here that might be planning to start this journey, right? Maybe because they are listening to us talking about AI all the time, right? But eventually their organizations might be planning, hey, we are going to start some project related to AI. And you, especially from a CX perspective and your experience, how do you think that journey, that process should look like?
Yeah, good question. I think it's got to be holistic, right? We need the organization to focus on purposeful and responsible AI. We shouldn't be promoting just diving in, and I think that links to the point on the board, right? We have to do this with our eyes open. So I think CX have a number of opportunities to help our customers to explore their current landscape, right? Where their organization is in terms of responsible AI policy, helping people understand the implication of using open AI or public AI tooling. But then to go one step further, so we've seen a lot about how data is the sort of the fuel of AI. And I think certainly I'm having a lot of conversations with our customers already about the data that they already have access to, that they may not have exposed or used for those particular benefits. So whether the conversation immediately jumps to AI, I think there's a lot of work that we can do together on data collection, normalization, cleansing, secure data handling practices, as well as helping our customers' engineering team build out a toolkit which is provided and responsible. I wouldn't like to think that we get shadow AI organizations where a company don't provide the necessary tools or access to tools that people then just start creating their own or going off onto the internet to see what they can use. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then obviously build out use case roadmaps and take it from there. But right now, I think it's that foundation.
Yeah. Two questions that are very related, right? LLM should be afraid about, from a security point of view. There are security requirements, regulation. What are the risks around, the LLM being hosted overseas, and what are the privacy or security concerns? Who wants to give a view on that?
Yeah, so I can take that one. So I've seen that, like I think the most responsible thing is to use as much as possible the open models, even though they're not that advanced or well functioning right now. I feel like that's like the open source community. If you have an open model, you have visibility in how it's built, what is the data set is being trained with. All the documentation is available for anyone to see and basically make their own opinions on is this safe for us to use? Is this basically? I think that's reducing the risk because if we're locking ourselves into just one provider like Google or only Meta or only OpenAI, there's always going to be a risk that something will go wrong, right?
I'm going to challenge you a bit to your response.
Yeah.
So, do you trust in putting your data in an S3 bucket in AWS?
So which one?
Do you trust in hosting your data in an AWS S3 bucket?
I don't know. Depending on the security level of the data, I would be very cautious in sharing that. That's why the open ones you can run on your own data center, and then you have all the security measures you need.
Do you trust, having your email in Office 365?
Well, I do, but that's...
The reason why I'm making you this question is because, in reality, whether you trust in the email in Office 365 or in having your data stored in an S3 bucket in AWS, is the same level of trust that you might have in OpenAI, in using an OpenAI model. It's all about the terms and conditions. So you need to read the terms and conditions, and then you know what are your risks and what are their obligations as well. The fact that you send a request to GPT-4 through their API doesn't mean that they are going to do anything with that. It's all on the use, terms of use. And for the free of charge version of these services, of course, you are the product, so they are going to do whatever they want. But for the paid services, they clearly state, especially in the context of enterprise services, they clearly state, there is nothing that they're going to do with that data, right? So then it comes to, okay, are they going to follow their terms of use? Do you trust them? It all comes down, do you trust in OpenAI doing what they claim they have to do based on the terms of service? Do you trust Microsoft in Office 365 that they are not reading your email and doing whatever? Or did you trust AWS that they are not looking into your SD bucket and, I don't know, doing whatever?
I think we can be conscious about the data that we put into these. If we recognize there's a lot of prototyping at the moment, I don't think people are building production-ready systems. So, as Jesus did, build a sandbox. Don't take logs from your production router.
Yeah, no, but I'm talking about whether there is a fundamental lack of trust because it's an LLM.
I think there should be caution. And don't get sucked into Kool-Aid, right? If
there are, most of the companies actually have some kind of contracts with these LLMs, and I assume there is something in the contract which says we are not going to use the data which you provide. And if you have something like that, similar to what Javier said, how we trust hosting certain services on Azure or AWS, it's the same thing. They shouldn't be using the data which we...
I think at the end, again, the reason why I was trying to challenge your response was because we need to ultimately also differentiate what are the real risks and properly address them versus what might be perceptions, right? And perceptions, it's all about your in what you think the reality might be, but the reality might be different, right? So that I think, and again, I'm not saying I'm right or who is right or wrong, but there might be debate around that point. So maybe we have another question: how soon LLMs can code in NSO? like they do for HTML or CSS. What do you think?
I think I believe it should be sooner than expected. We would want to try that out because that's going to be a huge challenge. But I don't know about the roadmap right now, but should be soon, hopefully. If we want, I don't think they want me to go into the approach of how we want to do it, so I'll leave it at that.
So there is another question. What is the correct way to train an AI to take decisions into the network? Who wants to take it?
I can start and provide some info. I would say train is a tricky word in this case. If we mean by train fine-tuning, or we mean like, okay, it's already the LLM, and then you are just providing context.
You choose the context.
Yeah, I choose the context over training. Training is a bit more difficult, and it's not really on my field of expertise. But again, if you are trained, you need also the computer resources to do it. Mm-hmm. So right now, I feel like the key for me is to provide the right context to the AI. And if you provide a good context, usually you will get the answer you are looking for. They are quite good to understand natural language, and that's the advantage I consider.
Mm-hmm. I want to bring a topic that I think it's very important. We haven't had a chance to talk through this, but definitely maybe in future sessions we should tackle it, right? Explainability, right? And this is not specific to LLMs. It's generic to any type of algorithm that in some way we're using to automate a decision. How do we know why that decision was made, right? And AI algorithms have different levels of explainability, but something that might happen eventually, let's suppose there is some deployment with some neural network, right? And that system decides that there is a certain failure going on, and maybe decides, based on how it's been trained, that we should execute this action, right? And let's suppose that this is wrong. It might happen, right? Even if the model has been trained, and it showed an accuracy of 99% accuracy, which is, reasonably high, that means 1 out of 100 times it will be wrong. So at scale, even the best model will make mistakes. So how do we address this? How do we address the fact that it might be difficult to explain when a system goes wrong, right? When a system makes a bad decision. Who wants to take it?
I guess it's no different to humans making a mistake.
Yeah.
So, we're quite comfortable with that. I think there's no such thing as a bad decision if you would make the same choice given the same data for the second time. Mm-hmm. Certainly, I think if you can see the workings as to the steps that led to the decision, it gives you the opportunity to say, well, this is the point where maybe an alternative decision process would have made sense. So it's not just the decision, it's how it derived it that's important.
Yeah, but you can also imagine for any decision to be made to have at least consensus with another LLM, right? Mm-hmm. So you basically safeguard, like you have a supervisor for any operator. Maybe you ask the supervisor, is this correct action to take? Mm-hmm. The LLM can do the same and converse with another model to see if they agree with the data set they have.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
And of course, bringing it back to testing, right? If that decision can be dry ran against a digital twin, it's more than just a decision, right? You don't have to pull the trigger on production.
Exactly. Actually, to your point on a human, right? There was an interview sometime back to Google CEO, and the journalist was well, they were talking about LLMs, and basically the Google CEO was basically arguing that, yeah, to some extent we still don't know how these things work internally, right? I mean, how they do what they do. And then the journalists say, how come? I mean, are you seriously saying that you don't know how they work and you still trust them? And to some extent, and his reply was, well, actually, we don't even know exactly how the human brain works, right? And we trust, right, the decision. So, and humans sometimes, goes out, right? We make all sorts of crazy things eventually. So yeah, maybe an LLM as well, right?
Yeah, I guess an LLM doesn't have emotion, right? It's not going to be thinking, oh, it's 2 minutes to 5, I'm going to just, go.
Exactly. So do we still have time? Or how are we going on time?
5 more minutes.
5 more minutes? Okay. Any more question? We have here, can we assume AI agents as domain-specific AI models? What do you think, Jesus?
Well, I think it's a good approach. If you had one agent that is an expert on a specific domain, and either you provide the right context via tools or also RAG in this case. My ideal solution at this point in time, because in the future things can change and be different, but at this point in time, I will pick any LLM that I consider good and provide the context. Like I said, tools or with RAG techniques, and I think I will have the specific answer that I like. In the future, maybe it's easy to train a model to be an expert on BGP, for example. But as today, I prefer to go with the context.
So Mark, you, in your presentation about testing, you introduced a bit in the last slide that there might be opportunities that, leveraging machine learning techniques, right? Can you elaborate a bit more on that? What are your thoughts? What are the opportunities?
So, I don't want to start a sentence with "I have a dream," but you imagine that you're just collecting as much data from consistently repeated test iterations. So right now we test for known success or failure criteria, but we don't ever really look at the unknown. We don't consider the butterfly effect, that yes, this passed based on what we were evaluating, but there's an outlier because for this iteration, memory consumption's gone up by 20%. I think when we combine repeated test automation with the volume of data that that's going to produce, it opens up huge opportunity for not necessarily AI. You could just do statistical analysis,
exactly.
Right? But you know that you have things which should be the same, and then you can spot the anomaly, and then you can start to ask why.
Exactly.
And for that, that's pretty cool. It doesn't have to be AI.
So we have another question here. How do we stop the chatbots that we attach to our documentation from hallucinating and making up methods that doesn't exist? So Mika, I think you've seen some of those hallucinations. So maybe what are your techniques?
At least I have solved this by making it more deterministic. It is sort of prompt engineering as well, asking it to say, I don't know, if it is not as part of the context which we give. That actually helped the chatbot from saying, the current chatbot which we have developed, if you ask a question other than anything related to NSO, it says, I don't know, because we instructed that in the prompt. So techniques like that at least helped in it trying to not hallucinate and trying to just rephrase the context which we give LLM. So it just essentially summarizes the data which we get from the documentation.
What are your thoughts, Mika?
Yeah, I think it's good. A good method to actually allow the answer "I don't know" is still a good answer as a context. So you don't having it making up things on the fly is not going to help anyone, right?
Exactly. Any more question?